Graceland, the estate of legendary singer Elvis Presley, is facing a legal battle now over a potential foreclosure sale.
For nearly 50 years, Graceland welcomed millions of fans who treated it like a sacred place, admiring Elvis's flashy jumpsuits, snapping photos by his pink Cadillac, and leaving flowers at his grave. Everything remained just as he left it, except for one hidden space. High above the public eye, the attic stayed locked and untouched. No tours, no cameras, no visitors. It was kept sealed away, as if it held secrets too heavy to face. Then, in 2025, that door was finally opened. What they found not only surprised the staff, it shook the entire legacy. Inside were boxes filled with memorabilia, old costumes, and forgotten photos. But buried beneath it all was something far more disturbing. Not a new album, a letter, or a diary, something deeply human. What exactly was hidden in that attic, and how will it change what we thought we knew about Elvis Presley? Let's uncover the truth behind the secrets locked away for decades. The boy before the fame Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8, 1935, in a tiny house in Tupelo, Mississippi. His parents, Vernon and Gladys, are young and struggling to make ends meet. That same day, his twin brother, Jesse Aaron Presley, is stillborn. Elvis grows up as an only child, and the loss of his twin becomes a quiet part of his story. Money is tight in the Presley home. Vernon works odd jobs, and the family moves often. Gladys takes care of Elvis with constant attention. She doesn't let him out of her sight, and he grows up deeply attached to her. She is the most important person in his life, and that never really changes. Elvis grows up surrounded by music. His family goes to church every Sunday, where gospel choirs fill the room with powerful voices. He listens carefully. At home, he hears country songs on the radio and blues music drifting out of the nearby neighborhoods. These sounds stay with him. When he turns 11, Gladys buys him a cheap guitar from a local store. He doesn't learn with lessons. He teaches himself, watching others and practicing at home. It becomes his favorite thing to do. He's not a natural performer yet, but the music pulls him in. In 1948, when Elvis was 13, the Presleys left Tupelo and moved to Memphis, Tennessee. The city feels bigger and louder. For Elvis, it's a place full of change. He attends L.C. Humes High School, where he's quiet and keeps to himself. He wears slick-back hair, flashy clothes, and stands out, even though he tries to blend in. He keeps playing guitar and listening to music, gospel, blues, country, and rhythm and blues. Memphis offers all of it. He spends time on Beale Street, watching local black musicians perform. He takes it all in without saying much, but inside, something is building. That's all right. In 1953, Elvis walked into Sun Studio to record a song for his mother's birthday. The receptionist takes note of his unique voice and nervous charm. Sam Phillips, the studio owner, hears potential. He doesn't sign him right away, but he remembers him. A year later, in 1954, Sam pairs Elvis with two local musicians, Scotty Moore and Bill Black, and they record a song called That's All Right. It's a mix of country and blues, but it doesn't sound like either. The recording takes off on local radio, and people want to know who this strange new singer is. Elvis starts performing live. At first, the crowds were confused. He moves differently. His voice is deep but playful. But soon, they can't look away. The way he shakes his leg, the way he sings, the way he stares into the crowd, people don't know how to react. Some are thrilled and some are shocked. He signed a deal with RCA in 1955. They re-record his songs, put out new ones, and suddenly Elvis Presley is everywhere. In 1956, Heartbreak Hotel became a hit. Then comes Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and Love Me Tender. The voice, the hair, the look, he becomes something new. A new kind of star. He performs on national TV, and each time, he sets off arguments. Is he too wild? Is it appropriate? But young people love him, and his fame spreads fast. He becomes the face of a changing America, even if he doesn't fully understand why. The return and the Hollywood years. At the height of his fame, Elvis gets drafted. In 1958, he joined the U.S. Army and headed to Germany. The fans are heartbroken, but Elvis doesn't try to avoid it. He says he wants to serve like any other American. While overseas, something changes. His mother dies back home. The loss crushes him. He becomes more withdrawn, more serious. In Germany, he also meets a young girl named Priscilla Beaulieu. She's only 14, but the connection is strong. They keep in touch after he returns to the US, and years later, she becomes his wife. When he returned from service in 1960, he's not the same wild boy from Memphis. His voice is smoother. His look is cleaner. He begins making movies, lots of them. At first, the films were big hits. He sings, dances, and plays charming characters. But over time, the scripts grow weaker. The music in the films feels safe. Critics lose interest, and Elvis feels trapped. He still records music, but the excitement from the early years starts to fade. Even so, his fan base stays strong. He is no longer just a singer, he is an icon. His face is on posters, records, and lunchboxes. Everyone knows his name. By the late 1960s, Elvis's career had hit a rough patch. His movies were no longer big hits, and his music wasn't topping the charts like before. People started to wonder if the King's time was coming to an end. But then, in 1968, everything changed with a television special simply called the '68 Comeback Special. Elvis appeared on stage in black leather, full of energy and confidence. He not only sang, he performed like the young man who first shook the music world. The show was a hit, reminding everyone why Elvis had become a star in the first place. This moment marked the start of a new phase for him, a chance to prove he still had what it took. Following this, Elvis returned to live concerts with a new fire. He soon made Las Vegas his home base, where his shows filled the casinos night after night. His performances were loud, flashy, and full of life. Thousands of fans came to see him in person, celebrating the King's return. Touring non-stop was exciting but exhausting. Elvis spent most of the early 1970s traveling across the country. His concerts were packed, but the non-stop schedule was wearing him down. The pressure to keep performing was intense. Behind the scenes, Elvis started to rely more and more on prescribed medications. They helped him deal with pain and stay awake, but also took a toll on his health. Friends and family noticed he was changing. The lively, joyful man the public saw sometimes vanished, replaced by someone quieter and more withdrawn. In 1967, Elvis married Priscilla Beaulieu. She was only 21, while Elvis was 32. The marriage attracted a lot of attention, partly because of their age difference and Elvis's fame. A year later, in 1968, their daughter Lisa Marie was born. Elvis was a caring father who loved Lisa Marie deeply, but his busy life made family time difficult. The couple's marriage was tested by the pressures of fame and Elvis's demanding career. Eventually, their relationship ended in divorce in 1973. Even after the split, Elvis remained close to his daughter. Priscilla later said Elvis was a good dad, though the ups and downs of his life affected everyone in the family. The early to mid-1970s were tough for Elvis. His health was failing, affected by years of hard living and medication. He became heavier, more tired, and less able to perform the way he once did. Though he still drew crowds, his energy wasn't the same. Elvis spent more time at Graceland, his large home in Memphis, trying to rest and recover. But his dependence on prescribed medication grew worse. Those close to him worried about his well-being. His personal struggles were often kept out of the public eye, but they were very real. The King, once the symbol of rock and roll's wild freedom, was fighting battles that few people saw. One of Elvis's biggest moments in his final years was the 1973 Aloha from Hawaii concert. It was the first concert broadcast live via satellite around the world and watched by millions. Elvis sang with passion, reminding fans why he was still the king. But after this, his health worsened. He continued to perform, but his shows were often uneven. He faced exhaustion and pain, but he didn't stop touring. Elvis seemed determined to keep going no matter the cost. The day the music stopped, Elvis was found unconscious on the floor of his bathroom on August 16, 1977 at Graceland. It was his sanctuary, but that day, it became a scene. He was rushed to the hospital, and hours later, the world heard what no one wanted to believe. The king of rock and roll was gone, when he was just 42 years old. Doctors said it was cardiac arrhythmia, his heart had simply stopped. But not everyone was convinced. The autopsy team noted obvious signs of long-term prescribed medications use. Still, a man named Dr. Jerry Francisco, who hadn't even worked on the autopsy, stepped forward to give a public statement. He said harmful substances had nothing to do with it. That statement sent the medical world into a spiral. Experts whispered about reputation management. Fans clung to disbelief. But when the toxicology report was finally released, it told a different story. Elvis's system was loaded with dangerous levels of prescription medication, powerful medications like Dilaudid, Quaaludes, Percodan, Demerol, and codeine. Not traces or even mild use. An entire pharmacy in his bloodstream. How did it reach this point? Who kept feeding the addiction? And why did so many people go quiet when the attic door was brought up? One name kept coming up, Dr. George Nichopoulos. Or, as the world called him, Dr. Nick. Between 1975 and 1977, Dr. Nick wrote over 8,000 prescriptions for Elvis. The meds ranged from painkillers to stimulants to heavy sedatives. His name was on all of them. When pressed, he didn't deny a thing. In fact, he claimed he was saving Elvis. He said his approach was harm reduction, that Elvis was already hooked, and the only way to protect him from the dangers of street drugs was to control the supply himself. Astonishingly, a jury accepted that. He was cleared of any criminal responsibility for Elvis's death. But that wasn't the end of it. By 1980, Dr. Nick was under the microscope again, this time for overprescribing to other stars, including Jerry Lee Lewis. He managed to hold on to his license for years. But in 1995, Tennessee's medical board revoked it for good. They cited reckless overprescribing and labeled his practice a danger. And then came the twist no one expected. In 2020, a book hit the shelves, Destined to Die Young by Sally A. Hodel. In it, she argued that Elvis hadn't died from addiction, but from a combination of chronic illness and inherited heart conditions. According to her, the drugs weren't the cause. They were a cover. According to Sally Hodel, Elvis Presley wasn't trying to ruin himself. He was trying to survive. He was living with chronic pain and managing it the only way he knew, through medication. If that's true, then decades of judgment, speculation, and public shame may have missed the point entirely. And if his drug use wasn't about addiction but survival, what did his family really know? What were they trying to protect? For nearly 50 years, the attic above Graceland stayed locked, untouched and unexplained. Not a single person, not even his most devoted fans, knew what was hidden behind that door. Now that it's open, the silence suddenly makes sense. Whatever was up there, it was personal. Too personal to share until now. The last goodbye the morning after Elvis died, Memphis turned into a grieving city. Fans from all over the country poured into the streets, nearly 100,000 of them, crowding the gates of Graceland. They came not for music or memorabilia, but for one final look at the man they had worshipped for decades. Elvis lay in a casket dressed in a crisp white suit and blue shirt, the image of him forever etched into the memories of those who saw it. 2 days later, on August 18, 1977, his funeral began. 17 white Cadillacs led the procession, a sight as grand as the man himself. Among the mourners were the famous and the familiar. James Brown was there. So was Sammy Davis Jr., Caroline Kennedy, Priscilla, Lisa Marie, and Vernon, Elvis's father, walking behind the hearse that carried not just his son, but an entire era. Elvis was buried beside his mother, Gladys, at Forest Hill Cemetery. But grief wasn't the only thing following the family. Just 2 days after the funeral, something surreal happened. A group of men tried to steal Elvis's body. It wasn't some wild fan tribute or bizarre act of devotion, it was a sloppy ransom scheme that barely made it past the planning stage. They were caught and charged with trespassing. But the message to the Presley family was loud and clear. Elvis wasn't safe. Not even in death. In response, Vernon Presley made a quiet but drastic move. Elvis and Gladys were removed from their original graves and reburied inside Graceland itself. Their new resting place was the Meditation Garden, a peaceful corner of the estate Elvis had designed himself. Graceland transformed. What was once a playground of music and laughter turned into a fortress. The house was locked down, rooms were sealed, and the attic, far from the grave, far from the public, was closed and never opened again. Not once in almost 50 years. But that raises an even stranger question. A grave robbery explains new security. But why shut off the attic? Why block it completely when it had nothing to do with the burial site? Back in 1957, a 22-year-old Elvis Presley was already a star. He bought the mansion on the edge of Memphis for $12,500, a price that would be close to $1 million today. The house came with the name Graceland, and Elvis never changed it. He didn't need to, and it suited him. Graceland wasn't just his home, it was his world. The estate had stables, pastures, barns, and even a chimpanzee named Scatter who wore little outfits and played practical jokes on guests. On some days, it felt like the animals ran the place and Elvis was just along for the ride. In 1964, he added the Meditation Garden, one of the quietest and most personal places on the property. Surrounded by fountains, flowers, and smooth white columns, he would often sit there alone. It was where he could think. Not about fame or fans or tours, but about the weight he carried. Now, decades later, the garden holds more than just memories. It holds the king himself. And just above it, sealed off from the world, the attic kept its secret, until 2025, when someone finally decided the world was ready to know. The room above the king, that peaceful garden, where flowers bloom and fountains whisper, would eventually become Elvis Presley's final resting place. But it wasn't just the garden that carried an air of mystery. After his death in 1977, Graceland transformed. The entire second floor, the king's private sanctuary, was sealed shut. It included his bedroom, the hallway, and the bathroom where his body was found. No one was allowed to enter, not even after the mansion opened to the public in 1982. Even world leaders were turned away at the stairs. But above that second floor, hidden even deeper than his private rooms, was something no one talked about at all. The attic. No photos. No stories. Not a single mention. It was as if space didn't exist. The Presley family never explained why it was off limits, and no one asked too loudly. Now, after all that time, the attic door has finally opened. In 2024, a legal mess nearly changed Graceland's story forever. A company with the name Nosen Investments and Private Lending LLC claimed that Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter and the current trustee of the Promenade Trust, had defaulted on a loan. According to them, Graceland was collateral. They wanted to auction off the mansion. The idea was unthinkable. Graceland, the most famous home in American music history, falling into private hands? The entire city of Memphis held its breath. Riley fought back immediately. Her legal team filed a lawsuit, accusing the company of fraud. She alleged that the documents tied to the loan were forged and that someone was trying to exploit her family's legacy for profit. It all came down to a last-minute courtroom showdown. Just one day before the auction was set to happen, a Tennessee judge blocked the sale. He called Graceland a unique cultural landmark and said its loss would be a blow not just to the family but to the public. Oddly, no one from Nosen showed up to the hearing. Not a single person from the company came forward to defend the sale. Graceland stayed where it belonged. But the entire episode raised a new kind of fear. What if the court hadn't stepped in? What if someone else had taken over the property? And what would they have found? In 2025, the silence ended. Archivists working at Graceland opened the attic for the first time since 1977. There was no press release. No crowds. Just a quiet step through the door of a room that had been sealed longer than most Elvis fans had been alive. What they found wasn't just old furniture or dusty trunks. It was a time capsule, a collection of deeply personal items that told the story of a man the public never really got to know. And suddenly, the years of secrecy made sense. The air was still, thick with dust and time. Lining the attic walls were cardboard boxes, stacked unevenly like forgotten towers. Their edges were frayed, labels faded, layers of dust untouched since 1977. These weren't just storage bins. They were time capsules, unopened chapters of a man the world thought it already knew. Inside, archivists found scraps of paper with scribbled lyrics, some on napkins, others on torn notebook pages. There were black and white photographs, raw and unedited, showing Elvis laughing in private moments, far from the cameras and crowds. A pile of unopened fan mail sat in one corner, letters dated decades ago, sealed, waiting. Most had never even been read. There were concert posters from his earliest shows, stage costumes lined with rhinestones and sweat stains, and even a few childhood relics, tiny toy cars, a baseball glove, a harmonica with faded paint. But one item felt different. It was a worn black leather jacket. Tucked in the inner pocket was a handwritten note. Just one line. It said to wear this when he needed to disappear. That message felt cold, personal and almost like a secret whispered to no one. The tape that changed everything, but nothing in the attic compared to what they found next. In one unmarked corner, a simple box rested under a layer of insulation. The label, nearly illegible, read Practice Sessions 1976. Inside were reel-to-reel tapes, untouched, unheard, nearly 50 years old. When archivists pressed play, the room fell silent. These weren't commercial tracks. They weren't polished for radio or rehearsed for stage. These were private, messy, and emotional. He was playing with gospel hymns, experimenting with blues chords, and, shockingly, testing early synthesizer sounds. It felt like the beginning of a new musical chapter he never got to finish. Then came the tape that froze everyone in place. Elvis, alone, singing Unchained Melody. Just his voice, raw and cracking. His breath shook and his words trembled. It was fragile and aching. It sounded less like a song and more like a goodbye. And that was only one tape. Stacked underneath the tapes were more unopened letters. Some came from fans overseas, soldiers writing from military bases, begging for his music to help them through the nights. Others were heartfelt messages from grieving families or fans battling illness, thanking him for the music that helped them survive. One letter stood out. Dated mid-1976, it came from a group of fans urging him to cancel his tour. They had seen how tired he looked. They worried he was pushing himself too hard. It was a desperate, honest plea. But it had never been opened. It sat there, yellowing in its envelope, like a warning that never reached him. One that might have changed everything. As they sifted through the items, it became clear that the attic didn't just hold memorabilia. It held memories. There, beside the glittering jumpsuits and stage lights, were pieces of Elvis that didn't belong to the legend, they belonged to the boy. A stuffed teddy bear, with patches sewn by hand. A worn Bible with a note inside from his mother, Gladys. Faded with age, but still legible. She had written that he should always keep it close, even when the world felt too loud. Its pages were bent, its corners frayed. Elvis's Bible had been handled often, bookmarked, highlighted, worn down with meaning. Next to it, his high school yearbook felt just as personal. Messages scribbled in the margins, goofy doodles, inside jokes from classmates who knew him before the rhinestones and record deals. These weren't fan souvenirs. These were keepsakes, saved not for show, but for himself. Lisa Marie once said that she found comfort in rummaging through the boxes. She said it casually, like it was just something she did from time to time. But that one line gave away everything. This attic wasn't storage. It was a memory. It was the one place where Elvis Presley still existed, not as a superstar, but as a father, a son, a human being. That's the strange thing. Once you start going through those boxes, the image begins to fade. The hips, the hair, the headlines, all of it falls away. What's left is someone more fragile, more tangled in himself than people ever imagined. Not the king. Just Elvis. And once you meet him, the question shifts. Can the world ever really see him the same way again? The disappearing act. When news broke in 1977 that Elvis Presley was dead, it didn't feel real. Not just in the way that losing a celebrity never feels real, but in a way that cracked logic. Fans didn't grieve. They questioned and speculated. Within 24 hours, rumors had already taken off. People swore they saw him the next morning at Memphis International Airport. The man had introduced himself as John Burroughs, a name Elvis had allegedly used before. The resemblance was uncanny, or maybe fans just wanted it to be. Then came another sighting, this time at a Burger King in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The king, apparently, had traded in Graceland for a Whopper. That same year, a novel titled Orion hit shelves. It told the story of a rock star who fakes his death to escape fame. The parallels to Elvis's life were obvious. Too obvious. And when a masked singer named Orion started performing songs that sounded a lot like Elvis's voice, it only fueled the fire. People were convinced. He hadn't died and he had escaped. Tapes began to surface, scratchy, static-filled recordings of a man who sounded a lot like Elvis. He was speaking, sometimes singing, sometimes just rambling in what seemed like code. He talked about being tired, about not belonging to the world anymore. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots, even if the dots were blurry on purpose. Most of the tapes were proven fake. Impersonators trying to cash in. Hoaxes planted by obsessed fans. But the belief never really went away. Not in the 80s, not in the 90s, and not even now. In recent years, the theories have only gotten weirder. The most popular one claims Elvis never died, he just switched careers. According to some corners of the internet, he now lives as a preacher named Bob Joyce. The resemblance is there if you squint, and some people never stop squinting. They compare ears, eyes, jawlines, voice patterns. They ignore the fact that Bob Joyce is decades younger than Elvis would be. They ignore logic entirely. Because, for them, the idea that Elvis faked his death is more comforting than the truth. The truth means he got old, got sick and broke down. But fantasy? That keeps him alive. Somewhere out there. Singing in secret. Preaching to a small church. Smiling at the world that thinks he's gone. And somehow, even now, part of the world keeps believing. Elvis Presley didn't just break records, he rewrote the rulebook. He holds more rare gold and platinum plaques than any artist in history. He sold over 500 million records worldwide. He starred in over 30 films. He changed music, fashion, and pop culture. He was the culture. And in 2018, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But all those numbers, all those accolades, only tell half the story. They don't explain the man in the attic. The man who kept old teddy bears, who saved handwritten notes from fans, who held onto childhood photos like they were gold. That part doesn't show up in charts or award shows. It's 2025, and somehow we're still meeting Elvis for the first time. Not through his voice or his movies, but through scraps of his life tucked away in boxes. Through letters stained with time. Through recordings that no one had ever heard. Through pieces of him that were never meant for the spotlight. These weren't just leftovers from fame. They were what was left of him, and that's what makes it hard to let go. The attic not only stores belongings but holds the version of Elvis that no one really knew. For years, Graceland gave the world a carefully preserved version of Elvis Presley, the polished legend, the icon frozen in time. What was found in that attic wasn't just fabric and film reels. It was the weight of a life that had never fully been understood. Now, with the attic opened and its contents exposed, the spotlight shifts. Not to the stage version of Elvis, but to the man who lived behind it. A man who, for all his fame, may have wanted to disappear into something simpler. What piece of Elvis's story do you think the world still doesn't know? And do you really believe Elvis Presley faked his death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.